So this is the fourth lecture in the series of our 6 lectures. Today we will be looking at pattern of spread of Buddhism and evolution of Buddhist archaeological sites and their significance. So just to today, I just wanted to bring out this very fascinating phrase that Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the very famous philosophers, had articulated. The earlier culture will become a heap of rubble and finally a heap of ashes, but spirits will hover over the ashes. And, you know, this is metaphorical, but you can understand that this particular statement has got high significance when we are going to look at the spread of Buddhism. So let's begin. Archaeology has changed quite a lot since its inception. It is not just about excavation now, but it's also about history, anthropology, semiotics, sociology, religions, cultures, politics, and psychology. So just to understand the standpoint from which we are going to approach is summarized here by a very famous archaeologist, V. Gordon Childe, in 1956. According to him, archaeology studies all changes in the material world. It's not about, one change here or there. It changes. It studies all changes in the material world that are due to human action, naturally insofar as they survive. And the archaeological record is constituted of the fossilized results of human behavior. And archaeologists' business to reconstitute that behavior as far as he can, and so to capture the thoughts that behavior expresses. So you can see that the domain of archaeology is very vast and it's broadening day by day, coming up to capturing the thoughts that behavior expressed through the fossilized result of human behavior that we see in terms of the material world. So the map here shows the extent of the spread of the Buddhist sites, but they are just a few handful of the sites. If we compare, for example, with the present of actual documented sites, for example, in the present day Andhra Pradesh, there are 140 archaeological sites which are related to Buddhism. So we are just talking about one state. And here, if you can look at the map, there are very few sites which are mentioned here. So we begin to get a picture of the extent of the spread of Buddhist archaeological sites in India. Now, approaches to understand the spread of Buddhism, we can resort to art history, we can resort to political history, we can look into the religious scriptures, we can look at the testimonies and travelogues, mercantile activities, and archaeological exploration. So there are many ways by which we can begin to look at the spread of Buddhism. And these are some of the few points I mentioned here. This bottom figure is from Gilgit, Baltistan, in the Pak occupied Kashmir. These are recent findings, which were discovered when the dam was constructed. The stupas inscribed on the stones, and so these findings are getting available day by day. Now, there are a lot of difficulties in knowing the Buddhist past, and one of the difficulties is the criminal neglect. So if you visit any Buddhist site even today, you will find that they are not well kept, barring a few sites, and there is a criminal neglect, and there is an uncivil silence over the Buddhist past, and particularly the Buddhist sites. And now the growing opportunism due to the nation-state politics, we can see that some of the Buddhist sites are highlighted, some are neglected to be destroyed by the forces of nature. So you see the ancient names of the most of the places are forgotten and erased. For example, what we call Nalanda today, before the Nalanda was discovered in terms of the archaeological remains, it was called the Bargaon, and Vaishali was called Basara. So, don't think that these names like Nalanda continued to be there from the antiquity. They are the renamed names of the places. And 2 centuries of research in Indian Buddhism after its fall is now providing us much needed information. And not much was known about Indian Buddhism in the 18th century. living Buddhist traditions of China, Southeast Asia, and Sri Lanka helped in research of Indian Buddhism, and it's even true today. So I just put this news item here. This is one of the places in Bombay, Kaniri Caves. It's in Borivali National Park, and I used to happen to go to this Buddhist archaeological site for a longer time. But you can now see that in 2015, near the Kaniri Caves, such a prominent place in Bombay, the new caves were found. And all the 7 new caves which were found were estimated to have been built between 1st century BC and 5th and 6th century AD, and that's before the Kaniri Caves. So you see, we see now the huge expanse of the Kaniri Caves, but these new caves, the 7 caves, remained beyond the human knowledge till 2015. And I think that's very important point when we begin to understand this period of Buddhism, because though there are a lot of excavated sites now, many of them are not known even today. So I just wanted to put it here, the very prominent site of Kaniri Caves, and the sites, the caves before the main Kaniri Caves came into being, they were not discovered till 2015. And to begin with the spread of Buddhism, we have to begin with the Buddha. And the Buddha, as Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had said, he was his own missionary. So, after his enlightenment, the Buddha didn't sit at one place and, meditated. He, of course, spent time between, silent meditation and, interacting with the masses. But he, till his last breath, the Buddha was a missionary. And the Buddha walked all over the North India, spreading his Dhamma. And we can now sketch the entire map where the Buddha walked. And he encouraged disciples to go in different directions to spread the Dhamma for Bahujan Hitaya and Bahujan Sukhaya. And the walking Buddha is an important visualization of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, because that's how the Buddha was. And most of the images that are handed over to us today, particularly when the Mathura tradition began, Mathura school began, the artists have mentioned that, their artistry cannot portray the enlightened Buddha. So whatever Buddha they have carved, it's before his enlightenment. So you see all the Buddha sitting in the meditation and all, and we see very rarely the Buddha walking. But in the Ajanta caves, you can see the Buddha walking here. And these are the photographs I took from the pillars of Ajanta, where you can see that the Buddha is in motion. And some of the historians have been saying that before Ashoka, the Buddhism was a minor sect, but it was not so, because the Buddhism was spread in all the different republics of the time. And the Buddha Sasana, as we can say, was well established. This is the spread of the Dhamma at the time of the Buddha. And I have already mentioned in the previous lectures, the area in which the Buddha, spread his ministry. And these are the 8 sites which are linked with the various aspects of the Buddha's life. Now, after the Mahaparinibbana of the Buddha, there was a tradition of relics. And this is one of the golden cascade, which was found in Pakistan, Gandhara. And it gives us an idea as to how the relics of the Buddha were enshrined in the gold cascade. And there is, of course, the Buddha standing, and so much of precious material was put along with the ashes and the remains of the Buddha. You can see all the precious material there. And this was the case with all the, Mahastupas that Ashoka built, where the this Buddha's relics were kept. This cascade is from the time of Kanishka, because there is a depiction of the Buddha, and you can see very beautiful lead, golden lead, which has a lotus with 8 petals. This is we have already studied the various Buddhist symbols. So these sort of things makes a very direct sense to us. So the gold relic cascades of the Buddha were found all over the places. This is the aspect that led to the building of the stupas. The relics were divided into among the 7 or 8 Kshatriyas, and they were at wars to claim the relics of the Buddha. And after that, the Kshatriyas were satisfied, and they were given their due share, and that's how these stupas came into being. So you can see here the distribution of the ashes. In the first photograph, you see these people try to claim the ashes of the Buddha sitting on the elephant. Well, elephant is a very important animal as far as the Buddhism is concerned. So, let's fast forward to Ashoka's Dhammavijaya and Maurya Empire that Ashoka found. Chandragupta Maurya found and Ashoka expanded. Magadha was a nucleus of Jambudvipa. There we have already seen in the previous lecture, how the advent of Magadha changed the geopolitics of the time. And interestingly, the Buddhism was flourishing, not only geographically, but because of the economic activities it reached beyond Jambudvipa, as we will be seeing. And Mahabodhi, of course, was the center of not only the Buddhist world, but the geopolitics of the time. So, these are some of the missionary activities that, Ashoka undertook. He sent special missionaries to different parts of the world, and it sent to Kashmir, Gandhara, Mysore, Vanvasi, Aparanta. Now, this place, Aparantaka, is a very interesting place because, if we bear in mind today's political map of India, these things are not going to make sense. But if we look at the ancient geography, this place like Aparantaka was a very interesting place which encompassed the Gujarat, Kutch, Sindh, and to some extent Bombay in terms of Nalasopara, because Nalasopara was a very important port of the time. And Yona Dhammarakkita, this is a very interesting word here. Yona means, he was from the Greek background. So a Greek monk was sent by Emperor Ashoka to Aparantaka, the present day Gujarat and Kutch and Sindh, and the part of Bombay, Nalasopara. Then in Maharashtra, he also sent the missionary. Maharakkita, he sent to Greece. And mention here, all different missionaries, and you can see the name of Mahindra and Sanghamitra. So the missionary activities of Ashoka were so important in spreading the Buddhism. And this is just a map of the spread of the Buddha Dhamma at the time of Ashoka. I put this coin here to demonstrate that this is after a few months, a few years after Ashoka. And the name of the king who issued is Kunika. And you can see from this coin that how Buddhism was the part and parcel of the state. For example, if you look at the coin, you can see that there is Triratna here, there is a depiction of stupa here, there is a swastika here, and the name of the king is encircled around the coin, and here is a deer, and on the top of that you cannot see it clearly, but there are two cobras, two nagas. So you see this, Buddhism, at the time after Ashoka, during Ashoka's period, it has become very part and parcel of the political system itself. So methods by which the Dhamma spread, this is of course what the core message was Bahujan Hitaya and Bahujan Sukhaya. I just put it here just to give you an idea as to through what mechanism the Dhamma spread. The Buddha encouraged the hygiene and health in the Sangha. And now scholars are saying that the Buddha instituted many of the reforms like brushing the teeth, not eating from the same sort of pot, eating separately so that the germs won't be transferred. And there were a lot of medical sort of rules that the Buddha instituted. And Jivaka was, of course, a royal physician, and he was in high demand, and his priority was to serve the Sangha first. And therefore, many people who were sick, they used to become a member of the Sangha just to avail this medical facility. And one of the reasons was that Buddhism or the Buddhist Sangha at that time promoted health. And Buddhism was, the Buddha said that trading is a very important economic activities. And he said that trading can give you much more profit than agriculture. And so the trading and spread of Buddhism went hand in hand. And, a lot of wealth was created. Now we have the evidences that so much of wealth was, created in the various Buddhist establishment, and various financial instruments were devised to conduct the various trading activities. So creation of the wealth was, of course, one of the important practices by which the Dhamma spread. And Buddhism integrated diverse groups of people. As we can see, all the tribal people, all the people who are at the bottom of the society, the Buddhism tried to bring it together. And of course, social reforms was one of the linchpin of the Buddha's of the practice of the Sangha at the time. And as we know that the Buddha devised a new social and economic model of relationship and development, and which led to the development of the society. And Buddhism, of course, promoted learning and education for all without exception. And there were the Mahavihars, or the Vihars, were the center of learning, open to all the people. And the Buddhist rulers, as we are going to see, that they were oriented towards people's welfare and the welfare activities. So one of the very important things by which the Dhamma spread. And Buddhism had urbanization wherever there was a process of urbanization. The Buddhism spread there like a wildfire. And of course, the artistic revolution, which contributed, which we see, it has spread from India to, different places, India to very different places. From Mathura, the Buddha images were sent all over the places. And, we can see that artistic revolution played a very important role in the spread of the Dhamma. So you see, I'm going to bring to you something very important. This is a coastal Andhra here. And I have been to all these important sites here in coastal Andhra, and it opens up to the Bay of Bengal. And these all the places are, some of the places had the relics of the Buddha. In Andhra Pradesh, there are about 12 relic sites which are related to the relics of the Buddha. So they were the Mahastupas, and they are all sitting on the coast, and they were the important centers for the trade and commerce. So, the Buddhist monasteries supplied capital needed to the merchants, because the monasteries were very rich. And the stupa was like holding all the property, as we have seen, that the stupa was considered to be the Buddha. So all the property was owned by the stupa, in other words, the Sangha. And, the Sangha was not fixed in terms of the monastics and upasakas. There were many people, different categories of the Buddhist practitioners, not just watertight into bhikshu, bhikshunis, upasaka and upasikas. And, the people who looked after the trade and commerce, they were the separate categories of the people. The people who looked at the hospitality in the monastery, they were a separate category of the people. So you can see that the whole system of the management was developed by the Buddhist monasteries. So the Buddhist monasteries gave loans and sold to merchants and cultivators. They were so rich in terms of their accumulation of the wealth that they used to give loans and sold to merchants and cultivators. And in Nashik, there is an inscription which says that local Sangha received money from grants. So the local Sangha used to get money from the grants, and Sangha invested in the corporations. It's in the Junnar inscription that there is a mention of Sangha investing in the corporation, the Bamboo Guild, and the various black, the corporation of the blacksmiths, goldsmith, and so on and so forth. So you see the Buddhist sites on the west coast. You see prominently they are on the coast, and you see Bharuch, Surat. They are all important Buddhist sites even today. Sopara, Kalyan, Kaniri, Elephanta, Shaul, and Kuda. And these all monastic. We shouldn't call them monastic sort of establishment, because they were not monastic in a sense of what we are now being told. The monks were very dynamic. They were like they were sometimes doctors. They were architects. They some of them had mastered the art of Shilpakala. They were artists. They were financiers. Some of them were deep into meditation. Some of them were deep into studies of Tripitaka, and we get all this whole range of people who are working in the Buddhist establishments, who are doing so many of the activities. And even there is a mention now, there is a evidence which says that the Buddhist monk used to have contract between each other, like the trading contracts. So you see all these things, and these places are on the coast, and they are very much linked with the Buddhist sites inside the land. So, and they were all connected with the network of roads. So you see the second photograph shows you that how the trade was conducted from the west coast of India to Africa, and to Persia, all the way up to various places. This is the spread of Buddhism by land, and the first photograph shows you the present day Grand Trunk Road. And at the time of the Buddha, it was called Uttarapatha. And if you can see it, it moves all the way from Sitwe in Myanmar, passing through present day Bangladesh and Kolkata, Delhi, Lahore, and all the way up to Kabul, where it was made accessible to the Silk Road. And this is the Grand Trunk Road of today, which was called the Uttarapatha. And the second is the diagram which shows about the Dakshin Patha. So all the way going down to the south of India, and there were very important towns around the Uttarapatha and Dakshinapatha. And Ashoka made it a point to have establishment to provide for the merchants and the traders at every spot. And later on, the Buddhist establishments became the places where the caravan could stop by. They could keep their merchandise and so on and so forth, and they became very important places for trade and commerce. Now I'm going to go fast towards what is called the Kushana Empire. And these maps are very important, and the periods are very important. And this is Buddhism in the Northwest, where the Kushana Empire came into being, and Kanishka was one of the very strongest votaries of Buddhism. And if you look at the extent or the spread of Kushana Empire, it also had Bodh Gaya in its possession, in a sense of Patliputra, and it was extended all the way up to the Chinese Turkestan and present day Pakistan, Kashmir, and this all the way up to Afghanistan. We need to keep these maps in mind to understand the politics, geopolitics, and the spread of Buddhism. And the Kushanas, they had to balance the different models, but they patronized Buddhism. And Kanishka, unlike Ashoka, did not make Buddhist axis, but made it a de facto axis. So everything around Kanishka moved, around the Three Ratna. And we can begin to see now that Kanishka helped to construct the various Mahastupas. And what we saw in Mohenjo-daro, that stupa is at the time of Kanishka. So this period is very important, and during that time, Buddhism spread all over the places, and the Buddhist culture went all over the places because the Kushanas were, they patronized Buddhism. So you see, this is the extent of the Kushan Empire, and these places are very important to understand the spread of Buddhism. And it's not that in other parts of India there were not Buddhist establishment at the time of Kanishka, not just in his empire, because the Buddhists were very, very powerful in terms of their hold over the trade and commerce. They were so powerful that sometimes they didn't need the support of the kings. So, for example, which we are going to look in the forthcoming lecture, that even when Buddhism was attacked, when Magadha was attacked, when Patliputra was attacked by Pushyamitra Shrunga, it caused a little hiatus, but it didn't do much damage to the Buddhist establishment. And many sites that we see, they are post Shrunga period. And how that attack led dramatically to the revolution and counter-revolution, which is the topic of the next talk or next lecture. But here you can see the Gandhara at one side, which was a stronghold of Kushanas, and these maps will become very much clear to us when we move forward. So Silk Road, we cannot talk about the spread of Buddhism without talking about the Silk Road, which went all the way from Luoyang, which is now one of the very important places of Buddhism of antiquity, and Chang'an, very important place, and Dunhuang, about which we are going to see in the last lecture. But you can see that it went all the way up to Damascus, and this is main Silk Route. But there are other small caravan routes which you can see here in the map, and there we can also see the maritime Silk Route. And this maritime Silk Route with the land Silk Route has become a very important vehicle not just for the trade and commerce, but it became a very important vehicle to spread Buddhism across the world, as you can see from this particular map of the Silk Route. These are some of the artifacts from the time of Kushanas. You can see the Buddha from Kushana site. You can see the Naga from the Kushana period, and you can see this gold coin which was issued by the Kushanas. And you can see that, in the Greek letter there's a gold coin, and there is a statue of the Buddha, an image of the Buddha, and the Bodho is written. The Buddha is written, and this is the unidentified ruler of the Kushanas, but you can see from the military attire that it's Kushana. Now let's fast forward a little bit we come to Harsha, and Harsha's period is 600 to 647 Common Era, and he was a very interesting figure in the history of the world. And that we can see how important it is. So in the pink here in the map, you can see his Harshavardhan's empire, and he also won over Magadha, and his empire was spread from end to end. And he was Vaishya by caste, and his enemies were the enemies of Buddhism, Shashank and Pulikesin too. He declared himself as a Buddhist emperor, and he held a very special ceremony, which was started by Ashoka, which was called the Moksha assembly. And every 5 years, there used to be an assembly of the Buddhists from all over the places. And they used to come together, sit together, and deliberate, discuss, celebrate. It was like a festivity, Buddhist festivity, and it was called Panchavarshika. So, Harsha conducted Panchavarshika. Xuanzang witnessed Panchavarshika not only here in his kingdom, but he also experienced Panchavarshika in other parts. And this festival, or this assembly of Moksha, it was called Assembly of the Moksha, was popular all over the Buddhist world. And so I'm going to bring the implication of that event in the next slides. So he declared himself as the king of Magadha in 641. And the king of the Magadha, because the Vajrasan, the diamond throne, was the center of the Buddhist world. Whether you are a Chinese Buddhist or whether you are a Japanese, whoever you are, the center place of power was Vajrasan, and whoever has controlled the Vajrasan, as it were, control the Buddhist empires in a sense of the control of the Holy Land. And he declared himself as the king of Magadha. Similarly, we have seen that Ashoka himself declared himself as the king of Magadha as well. And he was the king of Buddhist India, that you can see here. And there is a recorded evidence that the Brahmins tried to kill Harsha. Now, this is very interesting, because now we are talking about the empire of Harsha. That time, the Tang dynasty, 700 CE. You can see the Tang dynasty. It's shown in the green color, and you can see the expanse of the Tang dynasty, and this Tibetan empire, Nepal, and a new road opened to India via Nepal and Tibet, which was not there before. And many embassies started going from India to China. And Harsha's India was in constant contact with Tang dynasty and the Tibetan empire and Nepalese. And it was such a strong axis that when Harsha was attacked by some Brahminical forces, all this power was to get together to fight that common enemy. And you see, you forget the concept of nation state that we have today. That time the period was very different. And you see, this is the new road open to India via Nepal and Tibet. The Tibetans established the Buddhist king Narendra Dev in 640s. So you see that the Nepal has a Buddhist king, and Harsha's great efforts to build international alliances with Central Asia. Central Asia was a very important place at the time. So you now imagine China was supporting the Central Asia. Tang dynasty was exchanging embassies with the kingdom of Harsha, there was a very strong international axis, and that was the emergence of the Asian Buddhist axis of the time. And why it was possible? Because all the kingdoms of the time which were Buddhist in inclination, they were open societies, they opened the borders, and a kind of a new Buddhist cosmopolitanism started evolving. It was already there at the time of Ashoka, even it was there at the time of Kanishka, and you see this the implication of that is very important here. So Harsha's great efforts to build international alliances with Central Asia, Tibet, Nepal, and China through Buddhism. So the Buddhism was, of course, at the center heart of that alliance, and embassies were sent back and forth. Harsha sent sapling of Bodhi tree with Li Ibiao. So that's how you had your diplomatic relationship. And this Buddhist economic bloc would have stopped Islamization of the region, because that's we are talking about the 7th century. The Islam was just taking its birth in Arabia, and if Ashoka died in 640, Harsha died in 647, and that was a collapse of the Harshavardhan Empire, and then subsequently the Tang dynasty became very weak. They couldn't support the Central Asian Buddhist kingdoms, and that paved a way for the Islamization of the region. Had this Asian Buddhist axis had emerged, the picture of the world today would be completely different. So at least the traders would have remained Buddhist. So I come back to this Moksha Panchavarshika, which is a very important festival. And in China, it was very popular. Liang Wudi, who did it many times, starting with 519 all the way up to 547, about, many Panchavarshikas he held. And Chen dynasty, of course, did it. Wendi, who referred to Ashoka, also did it twice. And he was from the Sui dynasty, and the founder of Tang dynasty, Gaozu, in 618 conducted Panchavarshika, the Moksha assembly. So you see, this Buddhist culture was has become like a homogeneous culture, isn't it? There was a kind of a homogeneity, and all these Nikayas and all these things we see today, they were, now it is said that they are related to language and regions. There were never a conflict between any of the Nikayas in Buddhist history. Never, ever. There might be some philosophical disagreement, there might be some kind of a debate and discussion, but there was never a confrontation within the Buddhist, Nikayas. And that's very important point to make, to keep in mind. Now, there were some halts in the Buddhist development. Like, for example, first halt came, and that halt we can find out by, all the construction activities were stopped briefly for this period, Pushyamitra to 100 BC, and the second halt came in 75 BC to early 1st century, and the Naga images in Sanchi in the mid 1st century. So this is the topic of the next lecture that we will be having. Ashwamedh Yajna, Ashoka stopped the killing of the animals, and if you want to identify the counter-revolutionary forces that went against Buddhism, all those kings conducted the Ashwamedha, the horse sacrifices. And there is a mention of 2 Ashwamedha conducted by Pushyamitra. This was, of course, direct challenge to the legacy of Ashoka. That's beef hiatus in the Buddhist development. And I'm not going to go into that because that's the topic of our next lecture. But this is Pala rulers. They were the Kayasthas by caste, and this is their kingdom, and they ruled for a long time. And they professed Buddhism, and they're from 750 to almost 1200 Common Era. They ruled a large swath of land, which we are going to look at it. And this is the list of their kings. Now, very interesting. This is a very interesting point that I would like to make here, that the Palas, particularly Gopala, was the elected king. He didn't come to power by the way of the force. And he was a Buddhist emperor. And it is said that the area or the region of the time where he ruled was ruled by what is called the Matsya, the law of fish, the jungle Raj, where one fish will eat another fish. And he came to, order the society. And the kings of Pala dynasty, they claimed themselves like the followers of Param Saugata, and so much of the developments in arts and philosophy and trade and commerce took place at the time of Palas. And they were ruled by, eastern side was ruled by the Senas. They were also so-called Kshatriya rulers. But this is very important for us to begin in mind that the Pala dynasty, the Emperor Gopala, even we don't have to call him emperor, he was elected by the people, and he had developed a very intricate method of governance, and we can say that his rule lasted, the Pala dynasty lasted for 500 years. Now, these are the very important universities of the Palas. So Devpala ruled from 810 and 850. This is the kingdom of Palas. You can see, they were also the kings of Magadha. And this expanse you can see of Devapala. So even more than Nalanda, the popular university was Vikramshila. And there is an inscription found, Shri Vikramshila Mahavihar. They were not called the universities, they were called the Mahavihar. And the administration of that, there were 6 gates, and all the 6 gates were manned by very talented professors and the students. And if we go into that history of the educational institutes under the Palas, it's very interesting to understand how the process of education took place. Nalanda past its prime, but still illustrious. It was very famous university when that time. Somapura University is now being excavated. Odantapura and Jaggadala. And we are going to see how all these premium institutes were destroyed. These are some of the photographs of the universities of the Pala dynasty. You can see this very majestic and very elegant sort of the structures were created during that period. Now, to bring out the international part of the Buddhist spread, the Sri Vijaya Empire and Buddhism. Sri Vijaya, particularly in Malaya Peninsula and this Indonesia, and affecting all the way up to Java and Sumatra, Champa in Vietnam, and Khmer, Cambodia. You see, this dynasty was very, very, they spread Buddhism. This is the Borobudur stupa, which was constructed by the Sri Vijaya Empire, and it has strong connection with the South India as well. So it has the connection with Kalinga, it has the connection with Ceylon, it has the connection with South India. So you see this Sri Vijaya Empire, there is an inscription which was found in Nalanda, 9th century, where the king of Suvarnadipa, Balaputra Deva, has written to the Pala kings to grant the income of the 10 villages to upkeep their monastery in Nalanda. So there is an inscription to that effect. So you can see all this, Buddhist internationalism, the Buddhist spread, which is very dynamic. It's like a kaleidoscope of time, shifting all the time. But there are some underlying themes which we can note. And King Kanzita of Pagan in 1084, he had repaired some part of the Mahabodhi temple, and even there is also an inscription. And Arkanis, the Burmese, from the Arkan Sans area, they also had left inscription during that period, 1112 and 1167. So you see, all this will give you an idea of how Buddhism had spread and what was happening in the Buddhist world. So just to come out of this the temporal history, I'm going to just spend a few moments to show you how the various forms of Buddhism emerged in the historical time. So this Panare Kaji is in Konkan, and the ancient name of this particular place was called Pranalaka, and it was excavated in 1986. And during the excavation, a lot of interesting things were carved in this Buddhist establishment. Particularly, there is the early Buddhism there. Then there is the signs of the Mahayana. There is the sign of Tantric Vajrayana and Nath and Sampradaya. It is said that Machendranath was one of the first of the Siddhas, and the Siddhas we are going to study, in the next lecture, how important that movement was of the Buddhist Siddhas against, the counter-revolutionary forces. And you see this development of the Hatha Yoga. Now the researchers have proved that Hatha Yoga was developed by the Buddhist, and this is one of the important places of Hatha Yoga in Maharashtra, in Konkan. And it's very interesting that this tradition of the Siddhas spread from Kashmir to South India and Bengal, Odisha. Even today we are finding out hundreds of places associated with Buddhism, hundreds of sites associated with Buddhism, because that was the period where the Buddhism had survived for a long time. So Hinduism, question mark, because Hinduism is a very new concept in a sense. It's as we know who invented Hinduism. There are wonderful research coming up which is showing that Hinduism is a very recent construct. So just to show you that there is this Ashoka statue which was found in Panhade Kaji, and then there is this Achala, who is a tantric deity, Vajrayana deity, and this walls here is inscribed by the Nathas and the Siddhas. And you can plot the timeline as to how different systems arose, and this is finally Ganesha, which was inscribed there. So this is at a glance looking at one particular Buddhist sites, archaeological site, which shows from stupa all the way up to the development of the tantric Buddhism and the Natha and the Siddha tradition. And there is so much to know about the spread of Buddhism and its continuity. So this is the depiction of the stupa. This is here Avalokiteshvara. This is here Achala. Some call it Maharoga, but it's and there are 7 human Buddhas, and of course there are these Machendranath and Gorakhnath. All they are depicted there. One of the important constituency where the Buddhism spread, because it opened the gates of knowledge for all, the Stri and Shudras. Baba Ambedkar says the monosyllabic Stri and Shudras. So you see in Mathura inscription, there is a very wonderful inscription where the Bodhisattva image was set up by the nun Buddha Deva, the female pupil of the nun Pushya Harthini, together with her parents for the welfare and happiness of all sentient beings. This is in about 700 AD. And there is an inscription which gives that the women were very active. Before this period, all the Buddhist caves we find the mention of a lot of women. So the women were very active in supporting the Buddha Dhamma, because the Buddha's Dhamma opened the gates of freedom for them. This study of Sanchi, is very important, because there is an archaeological method where you study the entire landscape. So it has done for the 2 sites, Totla Konda and Sanchi. And this graph, I put it deliberately here. Julia Shaw has done wonderful work, the satellite imagery and LIDAR and village to village survey and mapping out all the areas around Sanchi, and a big Buddhist establishment was found. 18 dams were constructed by the monastic system, and the water was shared between the farmers, and the whole economic system has been brought out by this very interesting study by Julia Shaw. And I just put it here to show you how the spread and the trough and the down of high and lows of Buddhism here. So this is just, I put it here to show you these various waves of Buddhist development. Now this is Buddhism in Gujarat, and I have gone almost to all these sites here. Devni Mori is underwater in Shamlaji, and Vadnagar, and all these places were very important. And presently excavation is going on in Gujarat. And every day, as we hear that, a few days back, there was a news that the Buddhist site was found in Bandhavgarh in Madhya Pradesh. Many caves, about 70 caves were found there. So this is just to give you an idea of Gujarat. But this analysis can be done for all the states of India and countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, even Afghanistan. So you see, this is so important to see that how Buddhism, Gujarat, all over the places. all over the places, all the way up to the Pakistan border. There is a cave called Siat Caves that you can see here. There is Khambalida Caves, which is in the middle of the forest. There are even some of the caves are not shown here, like Sana Caves in the Gir. So Junagadh city has got the 3 important caves and the cave complex, 3 in Junagadh city itself, if we go even today. So you see, this shows us how, the Buddhism has spread. This is the case of Gujarat, but I told you that this can be done for any state. And, we have to go into a lot of details if we do it here. But in this lecture, I just wanted to give you an idea about the spread of Buddhism in Gujarat. That time there was no Gujarat. It's a political state that has come into being in the recent time. But you begin to get an idea as to the spread of Buddhism. Now, the myth of the death or disappearance of the Buddha is now Buddhism is now questioned. And Makhyon has done a very fascinating work on Sariputra, the last abbot of Bodh Gaya. And this last abbot of Bodh Gaya was, he has subtitled his book as Guardian of the Dying Flame, the last abbot of Mahabodhi. So it's in the 15th century. You can see his period, 14th and 15th century, Indian monk, Buddhist monk, and the last known abbot of the Bodh Gaya, Mahavihar in Bihar, India, prior to its restoration in the 19th century. Now, he was a very fascinating person, and he traveled to Nepal, he traveled to Tibet, and he traveled to China. And when he traveled all over the places, because Mahabodhi temple is like the heart of the Buddhist world, and he made the copies and the architectural plans of the Mahabodhi temple, and he carried those plans with him. And this is the 15th century replica in the Ming dynasty of China, 15th century. Okay, this architectural plan was given by Venerable Sariputra, the last abbot of Bodh Gaya, and it still stands there. Same, the Mahabodhi temple replica stands in Tibet, and all the architectural plans were supplied by none other than this great man. And Kabir and Raidas, the 2 non-Vedic, non-Brahmin philosophers of the time, whose legacy continues even today, they were of the same period. And if you see how much is the difference between Bodh Gaya and Sarnath, not much. So it gives a conclusive evidence that Buddhism was, maybe dying, but they were Buddhist all over the places. He was from the Eastern India, Venerable Sariputra. So Buddhism was alive in Doha tradition, because the Doha tradition is created by the Buddhists. Sarha was the first person to write the Dohas and Charya Geet and all. And, that tradition goes all the way up to the Bauls and, the saints of India. So Buddhism was alive in Doha tradition, Sahajyana, Kala Chakrayana, and other yanas that we can see. And in its practices and philosophies are absorbed in many traditions. And we can separate them. What are the Buddhist elements in different traditions? So let me go to this very important evidence which was collected by Harprasad Shastri, who said that, this tradition of Dharmaraja in Bengal, it's a Buddhist tradition. He said that if it is counted among the Buddhist tradition, the census will swell with the number of Buddhists. So according to Harprasad Shastri, it's a living tradition even today in Bengal, demonstrated the entire living tradition of the Dharmaraja, Dharma Thakur, present in all the parts of Bengal as the living Buddhist tradition. And, the Dharmaraja is, of course, the Buddha. And Dharma Senapati, we know, Sariputra and Moglayan. And, the followers of Dharma Thakur invoked Shunya. And the teaching of the Shunya is the proprietary teaching of the Buddha. The Dharma followers worship an earthen pot filled with water. And I told you when we were studying about the symbols that the filled earthen pot was a sign of the enlightenment, of the sign of the Buddha, an iconographic representation of the Buddha. Even today, we can find it in several Buddhist sites. And the priests of these traditions are all from the so-called lower caste. The tradition shows sign of resistance to Brahmanism. Resistance to Brahmanism became a very important part and parcel of Buddhism in Odisha and Bengal, which we are going to look into the next lecture. And, Dharmaraja is respected in Sri Lanka, according to Dharma tradition. In Ceylon, the god Dharma is greatly respected. So you see, so the question, what happened to Buddhism is a very, shrouded in the mystery, and we have to think about it. again. So 16th century Lokeshwara from Nagapattinam, when the Jesuits demolished one stupa in Nagapattinam, several images of Avalokiteshvara and Lokeshwara were found. Even today, in a lot of places in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, we find the images of the Buddha emerging from the water bodies. And so just to show you that, 16, and Nagapattinam has been a very fascinating place. There was a presence of people from China, the people from Burma used to frequent there, and there are now evidences coming out even in the 16th century that the Buddhists traveled to Nagapattinam. Now, interestingly, this is 18th, 19th century onwards. We have again this now called Bahujan Buddhists. This, I put this word removing the dust from the throne from, playing on the words which is used by Professor Ober, when he talks about dust on the throne. And he has written a very fascinating book on the Buddhism in the modern India. So you see Ayodhitas, P.L. Narsu, Mahastavir Bodhanand, very fascinating people. They were advocating a kind of a Buddhism, and which has been advocated in the Bengal and Odisha, anti-Brahminical and anti-superstition, and a lot of confrontation has gone into history. So and of course Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. This is a very fascinating book on the search for Buddhism in modern India, Douglas Ober. Now, where is the Buddhism today in India? You see, this is the National Geography photograph that I have put up here, and you can see there is a small pink portion here, which is showing the Maharashtra. This is the present day Buddhism, and what happened to the spread of Buddhism? What happened, to the decline of Buddhism? What happened to the fall of Buddhism? These are very important questions that we need to think. So I just put it here to make it a point that there is a lot of myths that needs to be challenged, and I think this is a vast topic of spread of Buddhism, and I just wanted to give you a kind of a broader macro idea as to how macro perspective as to how Buddhism spread, going down to a micro level when I talked about Pranalaka and some of the historical things that have taken place. So I'll stop here and open up for any question and answer or any comments.
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. I think, yeah, it's fine now. It has got clear. So thank you for this wonderful lecture of this archaeological series. And I can see, I think there are very, very interesting, like a domain that has emerged in your talk, not only just about how the Buddhism has spread and evolution of Buddhism in time and space, but also like the contribution in the various the economy, the democracy, and I think a lot of things that you have been mentioned, and that's very, very interesting at giving you a lot of insights. So I think if there's one or two, maybe there's just 5 minutes we have, so maybe one or two if interesting questions someone or comment have, we can take. Yeah. So okay, so if they can put in the chat box. But yeah, I mean, just connecting to the previous the talk and like symbols and semiotics and Ashoka's thing. I mean, it is very, very interestingly emerging. Okay, so Saroj, can you throw light on the spread of the Pala dynasty a bit? Maybe yes. You can. So we'll take only 2 questions. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think this question is very important. The spread of Pala dynasty. The Pala dynasty was a very powerful dynasty, as I shown you, and it like all the kingdoms, it has its own pros and cons, but it was substantially Buddhist kingdom, and there were, of course, confrontation with other sort of kingdoms, and as we can see that the Pala dynasty was spread up to the present day. Bangladesh and major part at the time of Devpala. Devpala was, though Gopala founded the dynasty, it was Devpala who took it to the height of its spread and development, and with it, the Buddhism spread. One of the things that I have not brushed upon here is that now the research is showing that we have to do away with this dichotomy between monastics and laypersons. because this dichotomy between the lay persons and the monastic was not there in the history of Buddhism. So for example, if you look at the spread of Pala dynasty in terms of Buddhism, we can very clearly see that there were Buddhist scholars. There was a term which has now come up called the Grihi Bodhisattvas. The people who have taken refuge in the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha, who used to stay in the houses, had wives. They were the married priests. They were the married priests of the time, and they Chandra Gomin. Gomin is another category in the Mahayana Buddhism. It is called neither lay nor monastic, isn't it? And so these all different innovations have taken place during the Pala dynasty, and this of course there was a confrontation with the Brahminical forces and Pashupats, Shaivites, Vaishnavites, and so on and so forth, which is the topic of my next lecture. But here I would like to tell you, in response to that we can trace how the Pala dynasty has evolved into a very magnificent center for the trade, commerce, internationalism, and at the same time the spread of Buddhism, the Buddhist educational institutes during the Pala dynasty. I cannot say more on that. Maybe we can have separate lectures on how those Pala dynasty. There are fascinating books now available on Pala dynasties. What I can do is look at Satvahana kingdom. You see the Satvahana, Vakatakas and all. What the history has told us that they supported Buddhism. You see, that was a period when Buddhism was in the ascent, and the Buddhism was self-dependent system. It didn't depend on the royal patronage for a long time. And as it is said, there are the patches in the history where Buddhism didn't depend on any royal patronage. Of course, the kings had to come forward to support the Buddhist establishment because they were so powerful. So, for example, if you look at the Nashik inscription, there is a Satvahana inscription. At the same time, there is an inscription of his opponent in Nashik. Okay, so what does it show? Isn't it? So it's not that Satvahana constructed these, or this language has to be changed now in the light of the new discoveries that are being made and that are available. So Satvavahanas, Vakatakas, and who constructed Ajanta, what is the history of Ajanta? Ajanta, even this name is new. There is a different name for Ajanta in the history, and we can see that there is a presence of the before the Christ stupa in Ajanta, and people attribute the development to Harisena, which is true because Harisena helped he gave, but he was killed very soon. So how did it continue? These are all questions. So I think when we're talking about the Satvavahanas and all, they are, we have to put a lot of questions now. We have to have this skeptical mind. The question that I'm going to, this is going up.
Maybe we can take one, otherwise it's already time.
Bandhavgarh, finger crossed. What is going to happen in Bandhavgarh? We don't know. The excavation is just started. Machindranath and Gorakhnath, Tibetan sources tell us, that they were the first Siddhas. There is a reference of Machindranath in the Tibetan tradition. And what are some Buddhist elements in Hinduism and all? We are going to look at that in the next lecture.
Yeah.
And I think that's it for today.
Yeah. Today is already a time. And a lot of questions come in, definitely very interesting because of the discussion is just so deep and detailed. So maybe we can take further in the discussion sometime. So I would like to thank you, Venerable Mangesh Dahiwale, for his very interesting, very wonderful and deep this journey of archaeological lecture series and bringing the history and all that points. That's very, very nice. So thank you, sir. And